that.
Good evening, Reno High School. Unit 5, what rights does the Bill of Rights protect? We have chosen question number 2 for you. The First Amendment, with its protection of freedom of speech and press, has been described as being at the heart of American democracy. Do you agree or disagree with that description? Why or why not? Why is the right to freedom of expression important to the individual and to the society as a whole? Under what circumstances, if any, are limitations on freedom of speech and press consistent with the intent of the First Amendment? Why? You may begin.
Stated in the mid-20th century by Minnesota Congressman Walter H. Judd. People often say that in a democracy, decisions are made by a majority of the people. Of course, that is not true. Decisions are made by a majority of the people that make themselves heard. We agree, at the heart of American democracy are the freedoms of speech and press because they enable individuals to express themselves and advocate for societal change.
In 1734, John Peter Zenger publicly denounced the royal governor of New York and ruled that the truth cannot be libel. Zenger was proven innocent. This colonial case sets an early precedent as the individual's voice should not be censored for light or transient means.
The founders' intentions behind the First Amendment was to create a government in which the people are free to express themselves and thus actively participate in government. Drawing from Cato's letter number 15, where a man cannot call his tongue his own, he can scarce call anything else his own. The founders included the First Amendment to allow the people to own their words and their beliefs, and consequently own their government.
In 1931, the freedoms of speech and press were questioned in Minnesota, where a law was passed which prevented the publication of malicious or scandalous material, as directed at John Neer's newspaper, the Saturday Press. However, the Supreme Court sided with Neer, ruling that although the information was defamatory of local officials, it increased societal awareness of local government shortcomings and was thus constitutional.
In 1970, the Supreme Court ruled in New York Times v. United States that only a free and unrestrained press can efficiently expose deception in government, as the press was to serve the governed, not the governors.
Following these ideas, the ability to express oneself is key to individual and societal liberty and progression of society as a whole through evolution of new perspectives. Articulated by Supreme Court Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes in the 1919 Abrams case. The best test of truth is the power of the thought to get itself accepted into the competition of the market.
Nonverbal speech, originally established in the 1969 Tinker case, was expanded 20 years later by the case Texas v. Johnson, in which Justice William Brennan stated, "The government may not prohibit the expression of an idea simply because society finds the idea itself offensive or disagreeable."
However, limitations on freedom of speech and press are consistent with the intention of the First Amendment because they guard against the subversion of government and prevent infringement on another's rights. Written by Sue Leeson, Oregon State Supreme Court Justice, liberty is not licensed to do anything one pleases. In some situations, limiting freedom to speak may actually increase a person's ability to be heard. Although the actions of the Ku Klux Klan in Brandenburg v. Ohio were ruled constitutional, the court decided that speech meant to provoke imminent lawless action was not protected by the First Amendment.
Times of war necessitate the need for limitations of speech and press. In 1919, Charles Schneck was prosecuted under the Espionage Act. The court ruled, the words used are used in such circumstances to create a clear and present danger that will bring about the substantive evils that Congress has a right to prevent. In 1967, the O'Brien decision established that speech may be censored if it furthers an important or substantial government interest.
First Amendment freedoms must also be limited in school in order to maintain a positive learning environment for all students. Articulated in the Hazelwood v. Kohlmeyer case of 1988, a school need not tolerate student speech that is inconsistent with its basic educational mission. These restrictions on speech and press uphold the original intent of the First Amendment by allowing the government to do what is necessary to protect the citizens and preserve the common good.
In the First Amendment stands a core fundamental value of the United States, the freedom to voice an opinion and participate in American democracy. Although at times limitations are imposed upon these rights, they are necessary for strict adherence to the founders' original intent.
As Thomas Jefferson said to Madison at the House debate on June 8, 1789, "The people shall not be deprived or abridged of their right to speak, to write, or to publish their sentiments, and the freedom of the press, as one of the great bulwarks of liberty, shall be inviolable." Thank you.
What limits, if any? I heard in your testimony you talked about limitations that the government can place on speech. So what are those limits? What's acceptable? Tell me.
Could you restate your question?
What limits should a government be able to place on speech?
One limitation that should be placed on freedom of speech is if the speech that is stated by the person does not help the common good of the people, and it creates such a way that hurts the community or advocates for violence.
However, going off what my colleague said, hate speech is protected as long as it is not libel or endangers the national security of the country.
Just to clarify, the Supreme Court case my colleague was talking about is Brandon v. Ohio. Another instance where speech can be limited is in schools. Hazelwood v. Kohlmeyer said that if a student's speech goes against the basic educational mission of the school, then it can be hampered.
The speech is also limited in the government when it comes to airwaves because broadcasting in terms of television media is public property. Those airwaves are public property. And because of that, with a captive audience, the government has a right to limit the speech that is indecent on those airwaves. Right now in the Supreme Court is Fox via FCC, and that deals exactly with that, with curse words uttered at an awards ceremony that Fox did not censor.
Let me ask this. Who in government is best positioned to decide what limits should exist?
That would, of course, be the Supreme Court, primarily because they are the experts of the Constitution. It's the supreme law of the land, and they should know it inside and out, which they do, thus presiding over cases involving First Amendment freedoms.
I disagree. I think Congress has the ability to set those limitations because, in theory, Congress is representative of the people, and since the government is for the people, by the people decide what is decent and what is not.
I would say that the people themselves should be able to limit words spoken. In a society, you sign up into the social construct, as they say, or a social contract. So at times, you can limit your own speech in order to protect the society's needs.
I would wonder how you would apply all of these concepts to current events like the Occupy Wall Street protesters. I mean, to what extent does this apply to flag burning, protesting that maybe isn't meant to incite violence, that does eventually incite violence? Where is the limit there, and what is protected?
Well, with the Occupy movement, the violence that was upheld in there was with the police force that hurt the Occupy movement was because the occupiers who were in a park, the park has certain time limits, and since they were abridging the time, place, and manner restrictions, the police had the right to arrest them and bring them to jail.
Another instance of the Occupy Wall Street movement would be the UC Davis incident, where the police went against their ability, their abilities as an official, and thus violated their rights. All that they weren't even speaking, and they did not go about the situation in the right way.
In terms of the freedom to express oneself, as you talked about flag burning in Texas versus Johnson, we need to limit a person's freedom of speech when it infringes upon another's rights, but we still need to expand freedom of speech to include expression where you're simply sending a message.
However, with Facebook becoming public as of today, I think that brings about very interesting ideas because the FCC will now be able to regulate Facebook, and what will be permissible and not permissible on Facebook becomes a completely new question.
Since we are been talking about politics for the last month and a half, we're going to talk about it for the rest of the year. What limits, if any, should be put on political speech?
As established in Citizens United versus FCC, corporations are people, and thus the contributions that they can make towards political parties is unlimited.
As in terms of political expression, like in Texas v. Johnson, he was burning the flag as part of a political protest, and that is permissible. As far as political speech and what the coming election will bring, like my colleague said, with Citizens United, although I highly disagree with the Citizens United ruling, I think we'll have issues in this next election with slander and libel, as corporations are now able to fund various campaigns that go against a candidate, perhaps taking quotes out of context, as seen with Mitt Romney's ad.
You talked about hate speech, but that's all you said, hate speech. Define it for me. Tell me what it is, and then tell me what you do to regulate it, if at all.
Originally established in Schneck v. U.S., that speech that proposed a clear and present danger was not protected. However, that was added on to by a
Bradenburg v.
Yes.
Ohio.
which also stated that it has to incite action, thus the incitement doctrine.
And another form of hate speech is if it attacks racial or ethnic values.
Hate speech is also libel or sedition, and I believe that's the definition of hate speech as far as in Bradenburg v. Ohio, or no, in Schneck v. U.S. that's what it was ruled.
So how do you regulate it? What do you do?
Hate speech is difficult to regulate unless it falls under the incitement doctrine. With Snyder v. Phelps and the actions of the Westboro Baptist Church, yes, they are exercising their First Amendment rights. However, what they say is incredibly hateful and incredibly untrue, but they have a right to say it because they are not inciting any imminent lawless action.
Similar with the Brandenburg case, the Ku Klux Klan could defame African Americans as much as they wanted because they were exercising their freedom of speech. But you were asking how it can be censored and how it can be punished in some ways. Well, the minute that speech goes forward and actually enacts violent, illegal action, then those that are saying the speech should be arrested and convicted.
And with the Miller versus California Supreme Court decision, where pornography was ruled as sending pornography was ruled as a felony, that's another way to limit or restrict the freedom of speech of hate speech, because it goes against the common good and a compelling state interest.
Does the strict scrutiny test provide any answer to this question you've been addressing about hate speech?
Can you repeat your question, please?
Does the strict scrutiny test supply any answer to the question about hate speech and how it's regulated, or whether it's regulated?
Strict scrutiny, to my understanding, is about what is and is not okay in First Amendment as a whole, and the restrictions on the First Amendment as a whole, regardless of whether or not it's hate speech, as ruled in Red Lion v. FCC.
I think most people would agree that freedom of speech is very important, but it's my understanding that when they're asked specific questions, then all of a sudden they start backpedaling. For example, should child molesters be able to say whatever they want to say? Should white supremacists be able to say whatever they say? And when they're asked that kind of a specific question, citizens kind of back off on their freedom of speech argument. What do you think? Do you think that Americans are truly supportive of freedom of speech, especially when they're faced with speech of child molesters or white supremacists?
Well, statistics show statistics show that when they have done research on people that are in a group, and if certain people, so say there's one person in a group and there's 4 different actors, quote unquote actors across them, and those actors are saying things that they don't necessarily agree with, but if they, because of the public and the peer pressure around them, they will agree with other people just to fit in.
As stated by Voltaire, I disagree with what you have to say, but I will defend your right to say it.
To the death.
To the death. So, I believe fundamentally that is where America lies. However, it's very difficult to condone that type of speech, and that type of speech that is so untrue and so indecent. However, we must defend their right to say it, because if we do not, then we will lose our own right to speak within the midst of that.
Good job.
Yeah. And Marie.
Go ahead, guys, feedback.
Me
You first.
Well, I'm like the others on the previous panel, just very impressed with how seamless your presentation is. It's almost like choreography. It's very well done. I asked the question about strict scrutiny, and I think that's a key principle that you want to at least know about when you go into it. This is the test for limiting speech, and it's referred to in almost all these cases. So have a look at that.
Strict scrutiny used for all speech cases or just racial speech?
Well, no, it's for in cases of political speech,
Okay.
expression of ideas.
Okay.
It's a different standard for commercial speech.
So
So
intermediate.
less exacting scrutiny.
Okay.
Can I ask you about that? It's
Sure.
just, it's content neutral, is that what it is? It's like the laws have to cover everything as long
Yes.
as it is impartial?
That's
to
part of
what's
it. It
being
has
said?
to be content neutral.
Okay, okay.
And then the test is, the government can take measures to limit only when it's necessary for an essential government purpose.
Okay.
And that's a very high standard to meet. It's almost never met.
I think you did very well. Once again, just very, very impressed by all of you. One comment that I would have, and something I think that would be good to work on, when a question is asked if there's a clear answer, I would give the answer first and then support it with your all the evidence that you have. I would say, is the sky blue? Yes, the sky is blue, and this is how we know. Not this is how we know. This is how we know. So therefore, the sky is blue. You see what I mean?
It's not a proof in geometry. Yeah, it's exactly the opposite. You want to have your answer first and then support it, okay? First thing, everybody did a great job. When you talked, you used your hands. There was good eye contact. You particularly, Kendall, when you give an answer, you lean forward. That's very compelling. It tells people that you believe in what you're saying. There's conviction. And so body language-wise, that's something that you're bringing your point home. You're not pounding on the table yet, but you're getting it, okay? Now, I pushed you a couple times about limits. When somebody asks you a question, you have to answer it, whether you like the question or not. There are limits to speech. You need to know what they are, okay? Now, the other thing you need to know, you talked about defamation, and defamation is okay. No, it's not. Here's what you need to know. Defamation, as far as governmental action, it may not be a crime, but you can still stop it as an individual. The individual can regulate that. So you don't get a free pass. You can't defame somebody. The government doesn't do anything about that. The individual has to do that. But know that ability to stop that is out there, okay? The other thing I liked, Kendall did this again. When she was asked the question about strict scrutiny, she wasn't quite sure where it was coming from. She reframed it and gave an answer. If you're pushed to the wall, do that. If you can't answer exactly the question, reframe it and give an answer. It may not get you all the points, but it's going to get you a majority of them because you've given an answer instead of the Perry moment that we had with the last panel.
I thought your 4-minute presentation was pretty good. Clear understanding of the issues. I mean, there's a lot in freedom of speech. There's lots of nuances, but it's a hot topic, and I really was kind of expecting a little more energy from you because it is a hot topic. Just like the last time, judges are a little more excited than you guys are, and I think I've told you, you gotta get fired up and get excited because speech is pretty important, and there's lots of hot button issues that you can talk about. And so I thought your cross-examination answers were pretty good. A little hesitant. There were some times where I kind of thought, we could just jump right into the answer. I agree with that. I mean, answer the question and then tell, why you believe the answer is there. But just think about all the First Amendment stuff that's going on now. I mean, and then political speech too. I mean, I think you could have done a little bit better on the political speech issue question because there's a lot going on and lots of people are having lots of strong opinions about appropriate political speech and et cetera. Although quite frankly they can say anything they want. I'd be, if we had more time, I'd ask you, you know, what you would do to, you know, curb some of the abuses that are going on, but overall, good job.
Thank you.
Very well done.
Thank you.